And it's on YouTube. Hello and welcome all as we dive into another Webinar Wednesday event. I'm Logan Arliss here live at Illinois Aviation Academy. Tonight we're going to get a special look inside what it takes to become an aircraft mechanic. Before we do so, I'd like to start off with an announcement. Illinois Aviation this year is going to be doing a winter coat as well as a canned food drive. So we asked if you could help us keep bodies warm and bellies full this season by donating slightly used coats as well as non-perishable food items. Donations will be collected here at the flight school, and we'll accept donations through December 31st. The donations will be benefiting the Northern Illinois Food Bank as well as the Salvation Army. Now for tonight's show, we've got some guests on from United's maintenance department, Mr. Garrett West, Kenneth England, as well as Matthew Murray. Thank you guys for joining us. And I'd like to start off by just asking you each to give us a brief introduction. Let us know how you came to be with United Airlines, as well as what your current role is within their maintenance department.
Go ahead and kick off, Matt.
Okay, well, my name's Matt Murray. I'm a maintenance supervisor here at Chicago ORD. I've been with United for exactly 3 years today. So I came here from a regional airline. I had a friend who worked here, and he suggested that I come work here, and I did, and that's how I ended up here.
Great.
Ken?
I kind of took the same path to getting here as Matt Murray did. I've been here a little bit longer than him. I've been a supervisor here at United for 5 years. Prior to that, I was a supervisor at a regional airline, SkyWest Airlines here in Chicago as well. I've been working in aviation, including military, since about 95, with a little bit of a break in between to go to college. But I started out working on EA-6Bs in the Marines as an aviation electrician, went to Western Michigan University, got my bachelor's degree in A&P license there. And then I broke into the airlines with Atlantic Coast Airlines here in Chicago shortly after 9/11. So it was kind of a rocky time in the industry, bounced around a little bit before I found SkyWest, where I worked for 10 years. And now I'm here at United. So that's how I got to where I am today.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. How about you, Garrett?
So kind of like Ken, I started my aviation career in the United States Marine Corps, working on OB-10s, C-9Bs, C-130s. Got out of the Marine Corps after 2 enlistments in 94, started with a company in Detroit, came to United as an aircraft technician in 97, was here for 6 years as a technician. Left the airline for about 6 years, became director of maintenance at Spirit Airlines for about 5.5 years, and then came back to United in 2010. So I've been here. January will be 10 years back with the airline. So came back, worked my way up, and now a little over 2 years, almost 3 years in the role as director here.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both for your service, and thank you all for volunteering your time to educate us tonight on what it takes to become an aircraft mechanic. I'd like to dive into some specific questions. The first question, what are some important job skills that are required in order to be a successful aircraft mechanic?
I can start this one off, I think. There's some obvious ones like being a good problem solver, working independent. But the one thing I tell people that is the most important thing you have to do as an airplane mechanic is you need to know how to follow directions, which sounds like a very simple thing, but it can be tricky sometimes, especially with some of these complicated maintenance procedures you're doing. Some of them can be, 50, 100 pages long. And a mistake you make in step 2 might not show itself until you're on step 800 and you're going all the way back to step 2. So following directions is, I would put that as number 1 on the list of things you need to be able to do and do well as an airplane mechanic. The rest of the stuff, if you can do it great. But if you can't do that first and foremost thing of following directions, then you're not going to get far.
Yeah, so I'll agree with Ken wholeheartedly on that. Is following the process, following the steps, following the direction, and not swaying from the basics, right? There's more that goes into that, but as Ken alluded to, there are some very dynamic things on these aircraft. More of these aircraft nowadays are more software driven, and you've got to have patience. You've got to follow the steps, or else you'll corrupt that aircraft and you'll start. And we've seen it where it's taken 4, almost 6 hours to clear messages because of not following the process, not following directions, and the aircraft becomes corrupt.
Good points. We'll go on to the next question here. What are the general requirements necessary to become an aircraft mechanic? So is there an age limit? And is a college degree required?
So
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Matt. So a college degree isn't required. So I got my A&P license off all my experience in the Marine Corps. So, people take different paths to get there, but a college degree is not required. You got to have that experience. If you go to college, you build that experience and you gain your license and take your test through the institution or the college or university that you go to. But that was the path I chose. I was in the Marine Corps. I had the experience. I studied the books. I went to the FAA, got my permissions to take the test, and that's how I got there. Matt, Ken?
I would agree with that. You don't need a bachelor's degree to be a mechanic. Most programs are a 2-year program. Rock Valley College, just in Rockford, is one that comes to mind. I went to the University of Illinois. I don't think that the 4-year degree is required to be a mechanic, but your choices are school or military, pretty much. You can do an experienced working under a certificated A&P, and then he's got to sign that you've met the number of hours required, and then you can take the test. But unless he's your dad, you're probably not going that route.
Perfect. So first, I'd like to say just go Illini. I'm also Illini alumni myself. And I was the last class to actually go through their flight program. Do you know if they still have a mechanic program down there?
No, they closed the mechanic program, I believe, in 2001. And the school closed not too long after that, if I remember right.
Yeah, it's a shame. They had a good flight school and they had a good maintenance department from what I've heard as well.
Yeah, we did.
We'll move on to the next question. So a mechanic certificate can have an airframe rating, power plant rating, or both attached. So us as pilots, we hear all the time, it's an A&P mechanic. So what do each one of these ratings mean, and what do they allow a mechanic to do?
So I'll take that one. So typically, most people have both. It's very rare. I don't think I've ever seen anyone that has just an A or just a P. But A is for airframe, P is for power plant, and it means pretty much what it says. Airframe is working on everything but the engine. Power plant means you're certificated to work on the engine, propellers, everything that goes with the power plant of that airplane that makes it go.
Perfect. You guys kind of touched on this question already, but what are the different paths one can take to obtain an aviation mechanics certificate? So I believe, if I'm correct, the 3 paths is the military, going through a certified school, and then the last one would be hard to get, as you mentioned, but through supervision of another certified mechanic. Is that correct?
That's it.
Perfect.
I actually did kind of a blend of the two, actually. So I went to the military. I was an aviation electrician. I worked on all the wiring. I was able to get credit for all the electrical classes, classroom requirements for the A&P license. And I had to take the rest of the airframe and power plant classes to get it, meet the requirements to take the test. But I was able to get credit for all the electrical and system and avionics tests based on my military experience.
Awesome. Now, once a aircraft mechanic certificate is obtained, how long does that stay valid for? And how do aircraft mechanics make sure that they stay current?
Well, there's no expiration. There is a time, I believe it's more than 6 months away from working on aircraft that the FAA requires you to be back into an OJT mode or on the job training. So there's a small period that if you're hired back into a company somewhere that you'll be under OJT, but you always maintain your A&P license.
Perfect. Now, the other term that we hear a lot as pilots is IA. So, for example, an annual has to be signed off on by an IA. So what does this actually mean, and what does it allow a mechanic to do, and how can one be obtained?
Matt, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'm just trying to unmute here. So an IA, that's inspection authorization. That's an additional accreditation, if you will, to your A&P license. You're going to have to take an additional class. I believe it's usually a week. And then you have to take a pretty hard test with the FAA, mostly covering AD notes, airworthiness directives, and searching for those and how they apply the airframe, the engine, or the propeller, or some other component. You have to do, that allows you to do annual inspections on an airplane and sign it off and put it back into service. And of course, annual, you have to do those inspections every year on your airplane. You do have to do a minimum number of annuals a year to keep that current, or you have to take recurrent training to keep that active, and that's done annually. Really, IA is only used in Part 91 GA. In the airline industry, we don't use IAs.
Very interesting. So we got A&P, we got IA. Now, what are the various specialty fields in which an aviation mechanic can specialize in?
So I'll take that one. Here in the airline world, there's three main ones. There's just a general mechanic who works on pretty much everything. Then you also got your avionics technician and sheet metal technician or structures technician. Those are the three most common ones. R&E's avionics technicians, obviously they do wiring, the electronics, but also at a big airline like United, you got a lot of other back shop specializations. We have composite shops. We have interior shops that do, overhaul seats and do carpets and cabin work. We also have power plant shops that we even do engine overhauls. We do power plant buildups, things like that. So there's a lot of different areas you can go into as far as specialization goes.
Perfect. Now, what are the various career paths that are available to one with an aircraft mechanic certificate?
Oh, that could range. If you look at Matt, Ken, and myself, we started out as technicians. We branched off in the management side. We've got technicians that we've worked with that have gone to maintenance control, to the aircraft planning, where they're working out the schedules and matching planned work to the routes of the aircraft. You have guys that will go into the inspection side and become inspectors. Guys that will go into records, quality assurance. So there's many different things and avenues that you can go down with working in aviation.
Perfect. Now, what would you say a typical day in the life of a United Airlines aircraft mechanic looks like, or is there a typical day for a United aircraft mechanic?
I think that's a great question. And I would say you're right. There's not a typical day. There's a constant in that we're doing some scheduled inspections every day, but every day a mechanic walks into this facility, it could be different. You may have worked on an Airbus today. Tomorrow you might be working on a Dreamliner, and the next day you might be working on a 777. We don't know. So every day is a little bit different, although there's some commonalities between the days. Today you could be working on a tire. Tomorrow you could be working on the tail. It just varies.
Got to be ready for it all, I guess. Now, if you had to pick one thing, what would you say that United mechanics love most about their job?
I think the thing they like the most is just how rewarding this job can be. You're really out there providing a public service. The ability to travel from coast to coast in a matter of a few hours has become almost a necessity. Take the recent pandemic crisis, for example, government spent billions of dollars keeping the airlines afloat, to keep traffic moving. You know, it's not just people that get moved, it's cargo. One of the critical things that United is involved in right now is we're flying plane loads of COVID vaccine back from Europe that Pfizer is manufacturing there. So it's very rewarding because of the services that we provide, not just as a mechanic, but as an airline to the world and the country.
Absolutely.
So I'll add to that if I could. You know, in our world, bless you, in our world, we sometimes live and die by delays, and we have guys that are very prideful in making sure that when their aircraft comes in on the gate from an inbound trip, that they're meeting the aircraft, they're clearing any logs that may be generated. We've got guys that will go up and do cursory walks in the cabin just to make sure the cabin is ready for our passengers. The guys take, as Ken said, a lot of pride in that job accomplishment and getting that aircraft out safely and out on time.
Yep. Very important part of the operation. What would you say now would be the most challenging part about being a mechanic at United Airlines?
Outside when it's negative, blowing snow.
When it's so cold, the paint falls off the hanger.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of challenges, you know, challenges in, you know, some of the things that Matt alluded to, taking on a new task on an airframe that you've not done, working outside in the snow, the rain, the heat. There's a lot of different aspects to it, but again, it goes back into that fulfillment and satisfaction of a mission accomplished.
Yeah, I would agree with Garrett on that. And that's something that some of the guys said too, is, you know, every day is different, but that's one of the challenges is every day is different. And if you try to apply your Airbus knowledge to a Dreamliner, it's going to be a bad day, you know, and then you're going to be stuck trying to figure out why you can't clear this message. So that's a challenge that all of the guys have said, is that we work on a lot of different planes, and kind of knowing which way to go on which kind of fleet type is a challenge.
Absolutely. We had a question come in from Dag Johnson. I know your guys' friend. Matt, can you expand on how a typical general aviation IA task is carried out in a 121 air carrier environment?
I sure can. So in the 121 world, you've got your own inspections and your own inspectors, and that's all dictated by a book called the GMM, the General Maintenance Manual. Every airline has it. It's a roadmap of how you're going to run your airline. So instead of having just the IA procedure that they do in general aviation, we're going to train our own inspectors. We're going to have our own procedures. We have groups that just do AD notes and the researching of those, and they follow up on how those are done. So it's far more encompassing. Part of the reason is the plane is so much bigger and there's so many more components to it. Just the IA system, the way it is in GA on a Cessna 172, isn't going to work for a 121 scheduled carrier. I hope that answers your question.
Yep. Next question. So you guys work out of United's hub here in O'Hare. What maintenance procedures are performed right here at O'Hare in our backyard?
I'll field that. So here in Chicago, we're considered a line maintenance station. So we're working on airplanes that are in active service. We do small overnight work packages. You know, the scheduled maintenance we do are things, they condense them down to something that can be accomplished in, you know, a 10 to 12 hour maintenance visit. And then any other non-routine items, unscheduled, you know, pilot write-ups that come up through the day. 90% of it, almost all of it, can be handled on the turns that the airplanes do at the terminal. Every so often we have to take an airplane out of service and bring it down to the hangar for additional work. But that's what we do here. So it's line maintenance, and you know, the heavy maintenance gets they're sent out to other stations. We've got other bases set up for the heavier maintenance.
Perfect.
To add some of that non-routine that we handle could be anything from flight control services being changed, engines changed. We've done landing gear here on 777s, DC-10s back when we were flying them, 767s. We cover a large spectrum of anything and everything here in Chicago.
Perfect. So I know that there's some things called C and D checks, which are pretty big maintenance items. Could you expand on, what goes into these big checks?
So most of them heavier checks where they get into the HMVs, the heavy maintenance visits, into your C's and D's. Those are your checks that are going to have the aircraft out from anywhere from 2 weeks to maybe a little less than a month. And some of these heavier checks, the entire interior will come out, floorboards will come out, heavy structural inspections, flight controls can come off, get ailerons reweighed and balanced. Those are the bigger checks that we don't do here. The highest level of checks that we accomplished here were A checks. We do have a couple of stations out there to do A checks and the heavier B checks on some of the smaller airframes like 737s, 757s. But most of those heavy checks go out to larger bases, and those aircraft are out of service for a good bit.
Great. Looking into the future, what does the future look like for aviation mechanic jobs needed in our industry?
There's a big shortfall. So there's been a forecasted shortfall for quite a while, and this is basically around the globe. Now, will that shortfall come evident now or within maybe the next year as the airlines and the industry recovers from the pandemic? I think that there's a lot to be told there and a lot to be seen yet, but there is a big shortfall of qualified technicians that will be coming about.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I think the average age of an A&P in America right now is 52. And there's not a lot of guys below 30 that are currently out there. A lot of the schools have closed over the past 20 years, so there's just not as many coming out. But yeah, it's definitely coming. There's a shortage coming.
Great. We had a good question come in talking about preventative maintenance. So what are some preventative maintenance procedures that you guys feel GA pilots should always have in their tool bag or be able to perform?
Preventive maintenance the pilots can do?
Yep.
You can check the oil. That's about it. Preventive maintenance oil.
Yeah. Oil and tire pressure, maybe?
Yeah. Basically, the best thing you can do in all seriousness is a walk around, is a general walk around. If something doesn't look right, ask a question. That's probably the best way to do a preventive maintenance program is look at things. That way you find a problem before it is a problem.
Perfect. Good answer. Now, what does United look for in a candidate that may be looking to work as an aircraft mechanic for United?
So we have for new hires, and when we're bringing in applicants, we have tests that are taken. So if you're going down the path of what we call R&E or 104 avionics technician, that test will be specifically geared to using meters, wiring diagrams, finding grounds, short to grounds. So if you're coming in as a 101 or aircraft technician, a basic technician, we call it, that test could cover some basic sheet metal aspects. It'll cover just basic aspects of engines, flight controls, attitude, what is roll, what is pitch, it'll cover a lot. So the test is not only practical, but it's also an oral test. So we try to cover both gamuts of that testing to find the best qualified or qualified individuals, whether they be, guys or gals, we look to hire the best.
Great. Now, once that test, let's say, is completed and you're hired on with United, what does the training footprint look like? And how long is that training process usually before, you're cut loose?
So you'll come in, a new hire will be in an OJT period for about 6 months. You have to go to the systems classes on each specific fleet type to get your airworthiness to be able to release the aircraft for the flight. So as Ken was talking about the overnight work that we do, once everything is done, then if you have that release in AWR, then you can go in and release that aircraft. So the aircraft cannot go until it's released. So, For anybody to say they know everything, impossible, right? We've got guys that have been here 30 years that are still learning. Ken, Matt, myself, every day there's something new that we're learning. So you're never really out of the training process.
If I can expand on that, we do have some locations where we're hiring guys straight out of school. Their footprint looks a little different. They're going to be placed into what they call a line of service. That's either airframes or engines or components such as gear. They're going to be matched up with somebody. They're going to be in that area for about a year and going in and out of classes, just like Garrett said. As we develop them, and once they complete that year, they can do what we call bid out to another line. They can go to the terminal, possibly they could move from structures to gear or from gear to engines. They have some options, and then they can start learning again. It's a continual process.
Awesome. Now we know that COVID has affected the industry greatly. Have you guys seen the effect of COVID in the maintenance department, and if so, how?
So we have felt some pain there, as you have folks that could come up positive or have come up positive, we got to follow the CDC guidelines. So and those guidelines currently are, if you've been in close proximity, which they consider 6 feet for 15 minutes in the previous 24 hours, anybody that's identified in those guidelines, we have to hold out in quarantine for 14 days. So, not only, everybody sees the news and the impact that the pandemic has had on, multiple industries. You feel the pain just in every day coming in and not having that normal schedule, but see how it's affecting your coworkers, how it's affecting the families, and you do everything you can to help people through.
Absolutely. Finally, I'd like to end with our last question, which would be, what advice can you give to an individual who wants to have a successful career as an aircraft mechanic?
I can feel this one. So to be a successful mechanic, one thing I advise everyone is you need to be balanced. I myself, I started out in doing avionics work. That's how I got my start in the military, doing wiring. So that's what I was most comfortable with. But after school and after I got out into the industry, I realized that I needed to really expand my horizons. So I recommend anybody find out what your weaknesses are and don't try and avoid them. Like for me, it was like structures and things like that were my weakness. So I actively sought out those jobs to try and get better at them. So that would be my advice. Find out what your weaknesses are and hit them head on. Because if you avoid them, you'll just exacerbate them. And work hard at it. It is a tough job. It is physically demanding. It's mentally demanding. It's going to take a lot of work to do. So don't shy away from that, and you'll be successful.
Perfect. Anyone else want to jump on that one?
Well, I'll add, don't be shy, because if you don't ask questions, you're not going to learn. And somebody may give you a strange eye or a strange look when you ask certain questions, but if you don't ask, you're not going to learn. Be confident, be positive, push forward, and I think we've said it multiple times here. Never stop learning. Always follow that direction and ask those questions. Have a lot of fun while you do it. If you're not having fun, you're in the wrong career field.
Great. Well, I'd like to just say thanks again to each one of you guys for joining us tonight. We appreciate your time as well as your expertise.
Thanks for having us.
We'll see you next time, guys. Thanks for joining us.